Radio around this town. Radio around this town. Victory on the battleground. We claim it now. Lady up, lady up. Lady up, lady up.
Welcome to the Lady Up America podcast. I'm Diane Canada, your host. Today is Monday. It's November 13th. I am so glad you're here. Y'all, I have got an interesting take on the breaking news today. So let's get right to it.
Founder of Lady Up America.
Do y'all remember that old song by the Eagles called Dirty Laundry? It was one of my favorite songs growing up in the 80s. This is the lyric of it. We got the bubble-headed bleach blonde who comes on at 5. She can tell you about the plane crash with a gleam in her eye. It's interesting when people die. Give us dirty laundry. Can we film the operation? Is the head dead yet? You know the boys in the newsroom got a running bet. Get that widow on the set. We need dirty laundry. Okay. Think about that for just a second. The news has to consider ratings. They have to constantly be shock and awing us. They have to constantly be sensationalizing things to keep us tuned in. We have to check Fox News. We have to check whatever it is to see what's going to happen next. We're sitting biting our nails and sitting on the edges of our seat. What's going to happen next in whatever the news cycle is today? This is what they are counting on. This is what they want. I heard a phrase years ago that said, if it bleeds, it leads. And that's so true. So think about that crass lyric that I just shared with you, and think about how we are constantly bombarded all day long with images, with headlines, with news, breaking news cycles. All day long, we have this intake of bad news, bloody news, dirty news. I think we're at the point now where it's like we just feel like the whole world is a big cesspool, because it's just full of nothing but bad news, killings on the streets and gang activity. And it's constant. It's no wonder everybody's walking around on Zoloft. I mean, seriously, it is not that I'm condoning that, but I'm just saying, with technology the way that it is, we have access to breaking news around the world instantaneously. Like, I was watching Titanic over the weekend, which if it comes on, I'm watching it because I love it. But I think about those poor people. Oh my gosh. But that news took a while to reach the Americas. Like, it took a little while. We didn't have that. I mean, that ship, God love those people, was going down at 1:30, and they were on, what do you call the little, Morse code, and they were trying to reach another ship to try to tell them they were in trouble. And then by the time they got to him, it was too late. The ship had already sunk. Now we can literally pick up a cell phone and we can have that instant access. And then, like I said, it took a while for the news to reach the stateside, but now it just feels like everything's coming at us at 150 miles an hour all day long. And if we're feeling that as adults and we know how to process the world, think about our poor kids. Think about just what they are being inundated with every day. So I want to get a little bit of clarity around the news today. When we start to focus on the things that go right in the world every day, just look at all the planes that take off and land in the course of a day. Very, very, very few plane crashes we ever hear about. Think about all of the people that come and go out of supermarkets all day long or stores all day long. Majority of that comes off without a hitch. The majority of that is pretty uneventful. Most people go to work and come home and cook dinner, and they have time with their family, and maybe they get in front of Netflix, whatever it is. Most churches in America on Sunday mornings, people come in to worship. There's no incidents. So majority of the world is ticking along just fine. But when we look at the news, it feels like there's a boogeyman around every corner. I don't want to take away from the severity and the gravity of the hurtful and harmful things that happen in our culture and in our world. Certainly not in the war in Israel and all of these things. Please understand where I'm coming from on this. In spite of all the technology and in spite of all of the different ways that bad news is getting through, right? We've got to learn to start tempering that and filtering that and limiting that so that we're not just walking around heavy all the time and passing that down to our kids. We want our kids to look forward to growing up. We want them to look forward to the things that the purpose that God has for their life and the things that they have to aspire to and grow into. And so I just want us to be mindful today as we're looking at all of the breaking news that's so upsetting for us, that we're also understanding what God said in the Bible about fix your mind on things that are good, things that are of good report, and limit that. We need to be aware of what's going on. We certainly need to understand it in context. And like I said, how going unchecked can affect our world. But we don't need to live in fear and worry all the time in this heaviness all the time. Jesus said, come to me, all of you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. My yoke is light. So there's a rest in Jesus that we need to find from all the torment and the worry of this world. And make sure we're giving our children who are in our care, the ones that are looking up to us, whether they're little children or even adult children, we need to set the role model for them of how to look to the good news and look for what's beyond this world, that this world will fall away. And this world is not even the end of the story, not even at all. This is a vapor. And what's to come is where we need to focus our eyes. All right, ladies, joining us for tea time today is our friend Aundrea Gomez. She is with Citizens for Renewing America, and just love having her on the show on Mondays. Y'all, please welcome in Aundrea. Good
Hi,
morning.
Diane. Good
How are
morning.
you?
I'm good, thanks. Happy to be
Hey,
here.
good to see you. Good to see you. Um, Aundrea, that we have a lot of things going on right now around our country that just have a lot of mama bears very worried. A lot of the over sexualization of the kids, a lot of these inappropriate books in schools, a lot of we know the CRT that's been going on for a while, but I think the over sexualization of the kids is really becoming top of mind. This trans movement, all of this. You're fighting back against this in a very personal way. You were a teacher for a long time. So I would just love for you to tell us what's going on in your world right now, and how moms can fight back.
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity to share this story. So, yes, I am a former teacher. And as a mom, we've done a variety of education. We've done private Christian school, we've done homeschool. And when we moved to Tennessee in 2015, I was convinced by other people in Williamson County that these Williamson County schools were phenomenal and that I should trust that. So we've done some public school as well. And then, after obviously for many of your viewers and listeners in 2020, we started to really get a window into what was going on with curriculum. And then even more so with what's going on with books that our children have access to in public libraries as well as in school libraries.
Mm-hmm.
And so in our district, in Williamson County Schools, there was a complaint filed by some parents about 5 particular book titles that were in our high schools. And so last year, the General Assembly passed legislation that became effective in 2022 called the Inappropriate Materials Act. And it laid out some specific mandates for the LEAs of what they were to do, what their responsibility was when it came to reviewing these books and handling disputes and so forth. Well, the 5 books in question, they put together a committee. The committee reviewed the books, and then they made a recommendation to the school board. The school board didn't, I think a couple of the school board members maybe read the books, but they took the committee's recommendation and they voted 8-2 to keep the books in our school libraries. And in that same meeting, there were at least two school board members who acknowledged on the record that these books were probably not appropriate for children to be reading and exposed to. So basically, when they made this vote, this 8-2 vote, they already were in violation because they had not set aside this process that the LAAs were going to have to follow. That actually the librarians and the teachers, they didn't set up this process. They left it up to the discretion of librarians and teachers as far as how they were going to have this process of reviewing books. So um, there are some other parents involved in this lawsuit, and I am just one plaintiff of five. And most of them are Jane and John Doe plaintiffs, and we're all parents, different aged kids, but many of us have high schoolers. And this lawsuit is based off of that vote and those five specific books. But then since then, our lawyer has included an additional 118 books in the complaint. So basically proving the point that these books are littered throughout the county at the different schools, even down at the elementary level, that are inappropriate. One of the plaintiffs has a kindergarten child and brought home from the school library a book with this transgender ideology in it, and as a kindergarten child. And so, this is right here in a very red county in a very red state. So if it's
Yeah.
happening here, it is definitely scalable across the country.
Yeah, that Williamson County schools, there are people that specifically move here to put their children in that school system because it is supposed to be ranked among the best. And so, yes, and in a very, very red county, a very, very red state, this is happening there. You're right. It's what's happening in areas that are not red. What are these kids being exposed to? So let's back up for just a second. So the five books that you brought to the attention of the court, and then you and the other five plaintiffs, and then the 118. Let's talk about what's in those books. I want to hear from you. I saw a series of these books, like a pretty good, collection of them, if you will. When I was running for office, people brought it to my attention. I was absolutely appalled at what I saw in these books. It's basically like cartoon porn for these kids, is what I saw. Um, these children, these characters in all kinds of different sexual positions, titles of the book saying this is normal when everything in the book is not normal, trying to just normalize sexual behavior and gay behavior and transsexual behavior. So I don't think we're being alarmists when we're talking about this. I think there's a very, very credible threat to the innocence of our children. So what was in the five books that you brought forward?
So and I have read all five books. I know that's going to be the first question most people have. Unfortunately, I can't get the hours back of my life from reading some of this material.
Or and see the images, I'm sure. Yeah.
Well, and these books don't have images, but they create images in the mind. And so when a child, these are all at the high school level, and so they're novels. But
Okay.
the descriptions of what's happening creates that's what we teach children to do, is to create like a movie in their mind, listen to the words, read the words, and you
Yeah.
kind of visualize, right? So you can't unsee those images.
Ugh.
But it's not even just this over sexualization of these books. It's the drug use. It's the suicide ideation.
Oh.
Um, Yes, and I wouldn't want my child to read any of these books. No
Mm.
literary value whatsoever. In fact, a couple of them were just downright annoying to even get through, because they were just so poorly written. So those are the titles that we're dealing with specifically, and then the list of 118 does include some of the ones that you're referring to, that
Mhm.
are the drawings that are, it's basically porn, but
Yeah.
because it's not a photograph,
Yeah.
they're trying to portray it as having some sort of educational value. Well, I can tell you none of these books have educational
Yeah.
value.
No,
to
none of
them.
them. I was disgusted. I was absolutely disgusted when I saw them. I couldn't believe my eyes. I couldn't believe that these were being put into the hands of our children. It's once you get past being mad, then it's just kind of like, how is this like, what kind of sick person would put this in front of a child? And these are the people that are running our school boards and running our teachers unions. I mean, it's mesmerizing to me that these could have gotten through committees, because anything that's distributed, kind of filtered down into the schools, goes through a bunch of layers of committees before it's approved. And the fact that this could get through, I just don't get it.
Yeah, it's interesting with the way the library books are handled. Again, there doesn't seem to be a process for this that's like a statewide process. Um, but we do know that there are organizations that will donate books to school
Mm-hmm.
libraries.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think, well, I believe that the responsibility is on these librarians to make
Yeah.
sure that if they take a book that's been donated, before they put it on the shelf, they have to do due diligence and they have to review the book. And that doesn't have to be a lengthy process. Or even to check it against, some of the book reading systems that are already out there. But I do think that there are cases where the librarians just are taking these books that are donated and just putting them on the shelves.
Without even vetting them, they just assume they're okay. There has to be some kind of, I mean, there's no layer between someone donating and the librarian putting it on the shelf. There's no committee, no one that approves that.
And that's the problem. That's
Oh my
exactly what the
gosh.
Inappropriate Materials Act is saying, that there is a mandate, there should be a process for that.
And they're
And at
ignoring
least
it.
in Williamson County, they have not created a process for that. And then for periodic review, um, you know, there's nothing. They've left it up
Wow.
to the discretion of librarians and classroom teachers. And that's exactly the
Wow.
problem. And what's really interesting is how they defend. They want to dismiss this case based on standing, and they argue that none of the defendants can claim injury,
Mm.
and so therefore we don't have standing. So once you have, obviously, if there's a potential that my child at a public school is being exposed to harmful content that's inappropriate for their age and grade level,
Hmm.
why should I have to wait until that exposure, until
Yeah.
there's damage done, before I have standing?
Yeah. It's called preventive measures. Seems common sense. To most moms, you prevent your child from being harmed by not allowing
Right,
them to
which
have
is why
access
we
to
lock
that.
your doors, right?
Yeah.
We lock our
Yeah.
doors. We
Hmm.
monitor what our kids can view on the internet or on television. It's because we are trying to prevent that exact harm.
Yeah. Yeah.
You put a
So,
bicycle helmet on your child for the same reason.
yeah. So moms that are in other states, if they were to start trying to find out if their children had these kinds of books in their libraries, what are the steps they take to find out? And then what do they do about it?
Well, I'm not sure what the legislation is in other states. There should be in my county. They do have a list of the books that are at the schools that you can go and check to see if you have a book title in mind. You can go and find out which school library carries that book.
Hmm.
That's not always the case for what's going on in the classroom. I know when I was a teacher, I would purchase books that were my personal books, and I would make those available to my students in the classroom. Those are going to kind of fall outside of that list. But as far as the books in the school libraries in Williamson County, they have documented a list of those books, so you can find out. I know that there are other organizations out there that have compiled lists for different states. So it is going to be a state by state kind of situation.
Hmm. What
Um,
kind of
I guess if
organization?
you're,
Like, do you have an organization in mind? Maybe we.
I think Capital, yeah, I think it's, is it Capital Resource or Capital? I think it's Capital Resource.
Okay.
It's Karen England's organization. She has some resources on her website
Hmm.
that parents can use. I know our local Moms for Liberty chapter in Williamson County has a a really good database that they've
Yeah.
created for Williamson County.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to look at one of those resources and look at the books that they have documented as being problematic books, then I guess you could FOIA the information. But I think, if you go to the librarian or you go to the administrators and you want to have a conversation first, some moms might want to just spend time volunteering
Mm-hmm.
in their schools,
Yeah.
to see, look around the school, look in the classrooms, and you're not going to be able to have access to everything in the school, but I think it's a good starting point for finding out kind of just what is the climate and the culture of this school. What are they embracing?
Yeah.
If you're seeing trans flags hanging around the school, then you're that's a big clue.
Yeah. Yeah.
But those are some places I would start with, and then I would just start asking. If nobody wants to give you that information, then I suppose you should submit a public records request.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's say they find out that these horrific books are in their schools, which they're in a lot of them, almost all schools, I would say. Um, what then can be done? I know we've had a lot of parents that have showed up at school board meetings. First of all, I'd love your opinion on whether you think that's fruitful or not, and then what are things that they can do other than showing up and expressing their concern at a school board meeting?
Well, so I always encourage citizens to build a relationship with people that are making decisions in your community. So start building relationships with school board members. Find out who they are, where they stand, look up their voting records, pay attention at the school board meetings. Even if you're not speaking, watch and listen to the comments that are being made at the work sessions and at the school board meetings and take notes. If you have a like-minded, friendly school board member and you identify these books are in the schools, maybe talk with them about what is the school board's policy for submitting a complaint about one of these books. Those policies are available publicly. You'd have to go to your school website, your district website, and look up their policies for the school board. And you should be able to find something in there, and then go through it and ask questions with your school board members. And then, I think you do have to do your due diligence. And if you have a complaint to be made about a book title, or maybe more than one, you can start at the school level, and you might be able to address it there, right, with the classroom teacher or that librarian or that school administrator. And then you just kind of have to go from there. If they don't seem to be receptive to you or listening to you or complying, then you might have to go to the next level. Obviously, litigation is not the first go-to.
Right.
This was a result of the school board, repeatedly just refusing to follow the law. And so this is a last resort that, most people don't want to get to this place. And it's a little bit scary for parents that are worried there could be some sort of repercussions with their own child if they are involved in a lawsuit against the school system. So I understand that. So, if you just kind of start at the local level and then work your way up the chain of command, and you might end up getting really good results and find that your school system is very willing to work with you.
I think those are really good points you made about do your homework first. Don't just come right out of the gate swinging, and like a bull in a china shop gets nowhere, right? It just destroys everything. But if we come at this with a measured response, I know you're mad, ladies. Y'all are listening. I know you're mad when you find out these things are in front of your children. I get that anger, but we need to harness it, and we need to do our homework. Make sure we're coming with facts. Make sure we're coming with a heart to correct it. And then, yes, I think that's a great idea. Go to the people on the school board who share like-minded values with you. These are such great tips and great guidance from you, Aundrea. I think this is going to help a lot of moms. I hate that we have to do this. I hate that we're in a country where we have to be this vigilant over our children. But one thing I will say too is that we need to remember it's kind of like whack-a-mole, right? You get these 5 or even these 118 removed, then the next one's just going to go right in. And so I think it's getting to the root of it, understanding the policy and making sure that you're holding your school board members and anyone involved accountable, but also teaching your children how to navigate it. We can't keep them from seeing everything, but teaching them how to navigate it when they are exposed to it, teaching them God's truth, the biblical worldview versus the secular worldview, and for them to be able to draw their own conclusions and make their own choices through that, I think is so key.
Absolutely. And I like the analogy of whack-a-mole, because it definitely feels that way. I will say that one of the questions you asked me earlier is, I think it was along the lines of, is this really, is addressing the school board helpful? Is it making the impact that we want it to make? And I do have mixed feelings about that, because I have addressed the school board on several occasions. It does feel like it's falling on deaf ears. It feels like they're not necessarily representing constituents, that they are just there to be the rubber stamp of the superintendent oftentimes. And I hear that from many people across the state of Tennessee, at least. So I will say I have pulled my children out of the public school system, and we will not be returning. And I would just encourage, it's not just about the library books, it's about the lack of education. So even if you were to get all those books out, are they actually teaching the children to read and to write and do arithmetic? And so for me, for our family, it just was a battle that wasn't worth it anymore. I've lost all confidence and trust that they are actually doing their job well. And that's in one of the top school systems in the state of Tennessee. So I can imagine if we were still in California, how I would feel about about the government schools. So that's, I just would pray about that. You can fight these battles, and I think that we still do have to fight the battles at the LEA level. But then, meanwhile, while we're fighting these battles, just remember it's our children that are ultimately, they're not getting the education that they deserve. So, and you only have so many years with your children. It's not like you can really fight this battle with them. My analogy is that the kids are really inside of a burning building. So I can stand here with a water hose and try to put all the fires out. But there's only so many years you have with your kid. So for me, what made the most sense was to get them out of the burning building. And then I'll continue to work on putting the fire out. But I wanted to get my kids out of that burning building.
That's so good. So good. Thank you so much for your insight. Thank you for all the good guidance that you give the moms on this show. I'm always grateful for you.
Thank you.
The enemy is after our kids because they are the nearest and dearest to God's heart. So if we're feeling this as adults and we are then even accidentally or just we can't help it, it's now flowing down to our kids. Now they're becoming depressed. Now they're becoming heavy laden. Now they're walking around feeling the weight of the world on their shoulders because they're kind of absorbing that from us. Then you take them into a school system where the enemy is rampant in there and he's all too happy to exploit that. So we have all kinds of things inundating them in school. Used to be in our day, we go to school, we learn things like English and like civics and like geography and there were things we learned. But now it's really become an activist arm of the Democrat Party. So now they're being inundated with all kinds of things that their minds are not ready to process. Their minds are not capable of understanding or really navigating, especially without our help. And if we don't know what's going on in there, then that's a problem. But we have all kinds of books that are being introduced to them that are on not only sexuality and all of that, trans, all this, but also suicide and on kind of fantasizing about that or fantasizing about other ways to live that are completely outside of God's design, or even the idea of just checking out. The idea, whether that's through drugs, is why we have such a massive drug problem in America, just sort of that mental checking out. Our kids are just not capable of processing the massive amounts of negative information that they are intaking every day. So again, if we see it from our side as an adult, and now we look at it, how our children are absorbing that from us and from the world and from the enemy, they are so vulnerable right now. So this is why I say we as parents, we got to get it together. We've got to lady up. We've got to turn that mess off, and we've got to refocus on what's important. What does God say about us? What does God say about our children? What promises, what words can we speak out of our mouths that are biblical words, that are rooted in truth, where we can break the hold that the enemy has on our children. They can't have our children. We praying mothers are very, very powerful. So instead of going around and praying, oh, I hope my child doesn't become a drug addict. Oh, I hope my child doesn't commit suicide. No, I claim my child is healthy and whole. Claim what God says about your children. I declare right now that my child will fulfill their God-given purpose. I command you, Satan, to take your paws off of my child. You may not have my child. These are the kinds of prayers we need to hear from mothers. This is the power you have as a mother to speak life over your child, to speak victory and blessings over your child. We're not just going to hand them over. We've got to first strengthen ourselves. What do they say on the plane? Put on your own oxygen mask before you help your child. We've got to strengthen ourselves. We got to step into our power. And then we need to turn around and speak that power over our children. We're not just going to hand them off to the enemy. No, absolutely not. There are things that are going to happen in this world. Jesus said, in this world, there will be tribulation. There will be sorrow, all these things, but he has overcome the world. Jesus has already overcome the world. So we need to focus on that. We need to be focusing on what he says, on what is, not what could be, what might happen, all these things, not even what has happened, but what will happen in his word, his timing, in his wisdom, trusting. We don't have to understand it all. We just know the one who does. And that's got to be enough some days, ladies. It's just got to be enough. But please, I beg of you, turn off, just limit your intake of the news. Go on enough to know what's going on, but don't sit in and marinate in it all day. Turn off the breaking news alerts on your phone. Don't spend near as much time on that as you are thinking about and concentrating on what God says. Because I promise you, the light is going to bring a lot more victory, not only for you, but for everybody that's in your influence, everybody in your sphere of influence. That's contagious. That positivity, that strength, and that motivation, and that inspiration, and that joy that we are so hungry for in our hearts, that joy, not happiness all the time, because things aren't always happy, but that joy of knowing God's got us. He's on the throne. That is contagious for people. Let us be a contagion of joy. All right, let's get to our parting prayer. Father God, we thank you so much that there is good news. We thank you that there is life on the other side of this world, Lord, that we have your promise that this isn't the end of the line. Lord, you've already overcome the world. Let us just focus on that, Lord, marinate on that. And when we're tempted to get into the news cycle, we're tempted to get bogged down in the heaviness of it, Lord, remind us, Holy Spirit, remind us to put our eyes back on you where they belong, Lord. We thank you. And I ask for that reminder to be a whisper in the hearts of every precious woman listening to this today. Help us to be drawn to the light and not to the darkness in this life, Lord. We love you, we praise you, and we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, ladies, I'll see you tomorrow. Lady up.
Lady up around this house. Lady up around this